Welcome to World School TV with your host, Trina Baldwin. We all share a common passion of travel, and we all share the same desire to educate our kids through the world of travel. And you know what? We all share the same fears as well. So let's blast those fears away and confidently commence or continue our world schooling adventure. Each week we'll be chatting with guests about all things world schooling. We'll be covering travel destinations and events, education options for our kids. We'll talk about what it takes to get going and what it takes to keep going. On World School TV, we're here to support you in every possible way.
Okay, so welcome to World School TV. Today we are going to be chatting with Lainie Liberti. Lainie started her adventure into world schooling about 10 years ago with her son, Miro. And yeah, they've been doing it consistently. So we just want to have a chat and see how the journey's been so far and what's in store for the future. So welcome, Lainie. Thank you so much for coming on to chat with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Trina.
Pleasure. Now, if you could just let us know, how did this all come about for you?
Oh, goodness. The travel part or the world schooling part or the combination of the two? Where's the best place for you to start or for me to start for you?
So what was going on for you at the time that you made the decision that you were going to start traveling?
So the question is, how did our world schooling journey start? I guess we'd have to go back 10 or 11 years. My son I've been a single parent. My son was only 8 or 9 years old. And during the 2007, 2008, there was a growing stress in the industry and the economy started to change in California. And I was the owner of a small branding agency in Los Angeles that focused on serving green eco businesses in nonprofits. And my career was going well. I had spent approximately 18 years working in advertising, marketing, and branding. And for the last 8 of those years, it was for my own business. And for the year prior to us leaving, my son was starting to get older. And one of the things that he said to me constantly was, "Mom, you're always working. You're never spending any time with me." And that was so incredibly heartbreaking. And for me, to hear those words and to try and balance what I was doing professionally, because in my mind I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. I was providing for my child. I was being the best single parent that I absolutely could. But what that meant was the sacrifice of actually spending time with them. So going back to 2007, 2008, this building stress, not only between us, but in the surrounding business environment, everything seemed to be quite, heading towards change. And I felt that very deeply. And then I started to get near the beginning of 2008, I started to get these visions of traveling, just letting go of all of it, just these wild visions. And at first I didn't tell my son. I just thought, oh, maybe perhaps it's stress and I'm just trying to reason away and create in order to move through this. But actually what it was my intuition talking to me. And I started to listen and I started to listen. And the echo of those visions and the intuition speaking to me got me very excited. Near the end of 2008, after the combination of not only listening to my own intuition and my inspiration and feeling the pressure of the economy and all the change happening around me, and my son saying to me that he didn't spend time with me, and that was heartbreaking. I said to him one night late in the office, I just said, "Miro, what do you think? Can we get rid of all this stuff can we just go have an adventure? Maybe take a year and backpack. And he's like, oh, yeah, we can do that. And I remember when I was saying it, my heart was beating really fast because what if he said no? What if it wasn't in line with his vision? What if he didn't feel the same inspiration? What if he didn't want the same thing? So waiting and speaking those words and tapping into my own inspiration and intuition and saying those words and looking at him, this little 8-year-old, actually was 9 at that time. Yeah, let's do this. I want to go. Yeah. And then he said, does this mean I don't have to go to school? And I said, of course not. So that's kind of the beginning of how it started. There's a lot more that goes into it, of course. But that the growing feeling, the intuition, the visions, the words from my son, and the economy, and just knowing it was the right thing to do. And then the hardest part was trusting that it was all going to turn out okay, that all of these things combined really indicated that it was a path that I was created for, that he was created for, and this was to be our journey. So, and it became our journey. We're still living it.
Love it, love it. And you know, you've hit the nail on the head there in trusting your intuition, I think. I mean, you were getting all these indications all around you, and you let trust guide you that way. But this is a whole new lifestyle that you're about to embark on, even though at this point it was only for a year in your head. It was a whole new lifestyle. So I'm sure there must have been fears that come up in the lead up to it. What sort of fears did you have to deal with, I guess?
Oh my gosh, you know, this is a really good question for me, Trina. I was quite fearful before we set out, and I was fearful about the unknown, basically. I was fearful about, am I making a mistake? I was fearful about, less so about our safety, because something inside of me always told me that the world was a safe place. So in that respect, I trusted more or less. I mean, there were occasions on our travels, especially in the beginning, that, some of those really irrational fears came up for me. And of course, those irrational fears then were modeled into my son, and I was able to look at that. But what came up really was, am I doing the right thing? Am I being selfish? Am I going to destroy my son's life? Am I being irresponsible? And also, am I giving up this beautiful career that I had forged for myself, into a really amazing leadership role, and that demanded a lot of respect and produced some amazing award-winning work that was published. Not only, the stuff that was produced for our clients, but won awards in the design fields. So we were, by all, intents and purposes, successful. We had money, we had a business. I was successful in terms of my career and my achievements, but it was still quite empty. It just wasn't, it was as if I was living and doing what I was good at, but it still wasn't quite right on purpose. And I couldn't actually articulate those words, but I felt it. I felt that something was just a little off. And it took me almost 5 or 6 years to understand that my purpose, living on purpose, feels very different than living a successful life. And that was powerful to me. So the fears that came up were surrounding change, really, and also more, I suppose I was more comfortable making a decision for myself, but I had the responsibility of making a decision for another human being that was interested in my care and whom I absolutely, was the world to me. So, those sorts of things drove the fear. And then, of course, there were like daily fears that came up, and, the relationship to the irrational thought, and, the unknown. And mostly about, am I making a mistake? Yeah.
And what would you say drove you to keep going, even though you had this fear that you might be making a mistake?
Well, I was able to clearly identify the inspiration, the feeling of inspiration in my body. And I know exactly where the inspiration feels when it's being activated. And that to me is a really powerful tool. And when Miro and I started out, we decided that we were both going to do some sort of like what I called walking meditation. I was once a Buto dancer. And through that experience, it helped me to slow down and get into my body for the purpose of practicing Buto. But I also realized it gave me the awareness of where emotions fall and sit and activate in my body. So I knew where fear was, and not just fear that was, fight or flight kind of fear. That's a very different experience. You're in the moment and there's danger, and that's a very different experience than an emotional thought-based fear, right? And so that felt very different. And I was able to realize that that kind of fear fell in a different place in my body, that the fear of speaking my truth also fell in a different place in my body. And as we started to travel, there was something called intuition or instinct that gave us messages, and that fell in a different place in my body. And Miro started to imagine and visualize as a young boy what that felt like too. And we would do these walking meditations. And for us, that became our tool. So inspiration was this heart-based thing, and I had that. So that was the feeling that helped me sort of combat the intellectual fear that I was feeling, not the fight or flight, I'm in danger fear. And then again, going into the intuition, like, no, don't get into this cab. This cab is dangerous, and not doing it. Yeah. Trusting that. So Miro had those experiences too many times. He's like, Mom, this does not feel safe. And I could tell because it's in this place in my body. And I would trust that. I would trust when he would feel it, and he would trust when I felt that. So we left with these sort of emotional awareness. It's not just intelligence because it's a body awareness. And that felt like it was a conscious, shall we say, education, a conscious learning. And it was a conscious tool that we used. And that felt as if we were going off, into the world with our own set of tools that we can tap into, that were clearly there in order to keep us safe. And we had some irrational fears, and there are times that, I think I told the story at the summit about walking down the street in this town in Costa Rica, and I remember the thing that I said to my son, give me your hand, that man has big pants. And it was this big, sort of created story in my mind about, danger's around. I have to be protective of my child. Danger. Here's a man who has big pants. I mean, and then we sat back and laughed, and we were able to evaluate did we actually have those warning signs? No, we were having an emotional response, which really wasn't about fear, it was about thought.
I love that. I love that. And once again, everything's coming back to that trust, really, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Um, listening to yourself, well, listening to your intuition, not your head a lot of the time. You know, you went on this journey and you were going for a year, and then what was the point along there where you felt, no, this is our life now?
Well, a lot of things happened. Um, we set out, like the geography of our beginning travels was kind of strange. We went to Mexico, then we flew for some reason to Costa Rica, and then we decided to head north back towards Mexico. But really our goal was to head south, but there were all these countries that we wanted to go to. And we were able to listen to our intuition that Costa Rica wasn't the right place for us, even though we thought in our head it would be a good fit. And before we set out, Miro and I came up with many different sort of, I would say, agreements. They were guidelines for our journey. One of them was to do everything in partnership, from the budgets to the schedule to all decisions. My word wasn't more important than his word. We either had to both agree or we wouldn't do it. The second thing is we were going to try and say yes to absolutely everything. And the reason why I suggested that and we both agreed to that was I remembered in my life before we left in the United States in Los Angeles, circumstances commanded that I said no to almost everything my son wanted to do because I had other priorities, which were work related. And I remember with every no that I said, I thought, God, there's got to be a day in my life where I can say yes to all of this. And this was the opportunity to do that. So going in, I wanted to be 100% present with my son and 100% present in my own life. So in order to do that, we had to say yes. And we talked about what that meant. And even speaking to a 9-year-old who, turned 10 early in our travels, he got it. He got it because he had the experience of what it wasn't. And so we started to head north. We were in Costa Rica for a couple months, and we headed north into Nicaragua, and fell in love with Nicaragua, and then eventually went up through Honduras, and then ended in Guatemala, and just fell in love with Guatemala. And he said to me, let's stay here for a while. And I said, yes, it just feels so good. Yes, let's do that. So we found a beautiful colonial house, and we rented it in the middle of Antigua. And that ended up being our home for about 9 months. We explored the city from what we created as a base now. And this allowed us to sort of settle and get present. And some days we woke up at noon, and some days I woke up early and we took a walk. And other days we cooked all day together. And other days we went to the park. And I remember probably for about 3 months, we walked through this grand colonial town and looked at every single door, and they realized that they had these beautiful, unique door knockers all over. And, we recorded them and talked about our favorites. And it was a slower way of just being together and just exploring. And so many changes happened to both of us during that time. And I'm going to just tell you a quick story, and then I'll get back to how this became a life journey. Yeah. So one day we were sitting in the park in Antigua, somewhere. And a gentleman, an older gentleman, came and sat down next to Miro and I, and he said, "Oh, hello, young lady." I was like, "Thanks." He was probably in his 70s, and he spoke English, and it was lovely to have a conversation with an adult who spoke English, because at the time I didn't speak Spanish, and somebody who thought I was a young lady, which was kind of nice. And we just, struck up a conversation, and he told us a little bit about his life, and, he had worked in trade and had been back and forth to the U.S. all of his adult life for 40 years, which is where he learned this wonderful English. And then he said to me, "So tell me, what do you do?" And I looked at him and I said, "When?" And then it occurred to me that, wait a minute, normally, any time before this, I would say, I'm an art director, I'm a business owner, I'm a mother, I run this group, I do this, I do that. And I would start listing my achievements or titles or other things that I used as my identity that were very, very, strong. I was somebody who achieved a lot, and I was always busy, and I always did a lot. I was an activist, all these, crazy, wonderful titles. But when I said to him, "When? What do you do? When?" it occurred to me that I had really unconsciously let go of these identities that didn't serve me in being the best person I could be in my life with my son and being present, because they weren't important, and they weren't important to me anymore, nor did I actually do the things anymore to warrant using those titles. So what do I do? When, I'm here, I'm present, I'm living, I'm like all of those things. And that was such a huge, profound moment to me, massive moment. And I remember going back to our house, our beautiful house, and Miro and I talked about that for a long time. And then he said to me, "Mom, let's just keep doing this forever." And of course I had to say yes, because that was our deal. And I was in the state of mind to actually give him a full committed yes, a yes with full commitment behind it, with, yeah, okay, I don't know what this path looks like, so yes, let's do it and let's figure it out. And that's sort of how our 1-year trip turned into, oh, let's just keep doing it until we're not doing it anymore.
Fantastic. I love that. Now, look, one of the things that I'm so grateful to you for is the community that you've created, the WorldSchooling community that you've been part of creating across the world. It's a thing that I know myself, I seek in my travels. I mean, travelling is absolutely amazing, and there's so many experiences we have. But that community thing is something that everyone desires in every part of their life, whether it's a gym community or, a chess community, if that's where your passion is. And I love that you've been part of creating this WorldSchooling. So what was the lead up to actually doing that? What was happening for you that you were inspired to create these communities?
Well, I mean, all of this stuff sort of happened accidentally. There was never a giant intention to do that. It all came from first accidentally and then pretty much through need. I started to blog our journey. I started to write about all the changes that were going on inside of me as a single woman, being middle-aged, being a single parent, traveling, and then all of the sort of internal discoveries and changes that were happening both to me and from my perspective of what was happening to my child. And people started to read it. It blew me away. I never had any intention for my blog to be, so public. Of course I wrote it, but I wrote it, this is 10 years ago. The thought was this is going to be a journal, and this will be something that I can give to my son about our adventure and his childhood. And we recorded things like, where we were, and then together we looked up the history, and anything that became interesting, we would go down that path. Then we decided that, why don't we do a project together? Because at the time he wasn't really writing, although he's turned into an incredible writer. Why don't we do a podcast together? And so the first year of our travels, we took this on as a project. That was one of the things we did while we were in Guatemala, that we started while we were living in that house, because we had time. And we were so fascinated by the world around us. And I had I was able to tap back into my natural curiosity, which was a huge part of my childhood, but somehow became suppressed as I became an adult. But now here's the freedom to go back to looking at the world and looking at it with my child. And again, why were there, these doors with these giant door knockers, and what did that mean? And why is the city of Antigua painted in such a way? And these were all questions that we could find the answers to together. And all the people that we started to meet and invited us to their home, locals, business owners, neighbors, that wanted to share their lives with us. We wanted to start telling the stories. We wanted to not only record it, not just me writing about it, but do this project together. So together we started a podcast, which basically was called Raising Miro on the Road of Life. We co-wrote it, co-produced it, co-researched it, and co-edited it. I mean, we did the whole thing together. And part of what we did was we would do a research segment together, and then we would record the script. We'd write the script together. He'd do a line, I'd do a line, he'd do, and so forth. And, we'd tell a story about what we were learning. And then during each episode, either Miro would interview somebody or I would interview somebody. And it would just be somebody that we met. It could be somebody that we met online, or it could be somebody that is in the particular area that we were in. And they were sort of like two segments that were separate stories. And we would produce this, I think, about every week or every other week. And it became this really fun educational project for us. And we were doing it together. And like I said, people started to read our blogs. They started to listen to our podcasts. And then I started to get emails from people asking me, how are you so brave? Or you're a single parent. How do you travel with 6 kids? Where do you go in Asia? And I was like, what? First of all, I have 1 kid. I'm not brave. I've never been to Asia at that point. These are things I don't know about. So I decided instead, and I spent almost a year answering every question. Like, okay, so this is how we do it. This is how, this is what our budget is. Here's how we afforded it, how we afford our travels. This is our approach to this. This is our approach to that. But I don't have answers to everything. And I'm just, I would always end my emails with, I'm just trying to figure this out on my own too. So I don't know, but if there's any way I can support you, let me know. But realize I don't have answers. I have more questions than anything. And after about a year of writing these messages to every single person, I was like, you know what? Somebody else has got to know how to travel with 6 kids, and somebody else has got to know more about Asia than just Googling. Let's all get together and share this information. And so that became the birth of the first World Schoolers group that I started to facilitate. And that was probably in 2012. I took over a group that had been started by somebody else that had 200 people in it, but it was completely dormant. And I was like, this is the perfect place for it, because world schooling, which is a term that I started to use, is not just unschooling. It's not just homeschooling. It's not just one particular thing. You can learn from the world, even from your backyard. And I think if we're going to create a group, we need to honor all of these different styles and approaches to learning, because each person has their own perspective. And if we're seeking advice and seeking information, let's ask everybody. And so that was the birth of that group, and it eventually grew into 48,000 people. And now I'm not a part of that group. And I'm starting, once again, a smaller group on Facebook. And we're about 3,500 people already. So back to the original idea of being in community, supporting one another, and each person has a piece of the story to tell. So everybody's voice is important. So it happened through need, because I didn't have the answers, or I had a little bit of the story, but not the answers. I had experiences. And then I realized years later that I needed community too. So I finally had peers that were not sitting in judgment of the choices that we've made, that were on a similar path but doing it their way. And those were my peers. And those were the people that understood the challenges that we were facing. And sometimes the isolation and loneliness, and sometimes they understood the pressures of being away from family and what it meant to be a parent in a place where your children were not born. Understanding the whole psychology behind third culture children is really important too. So all of this information we were able to share, investigate together, especially in the beginning days of my first World Schooling Facebook group. And now we're really getting back to that in our second group, which is amazing.
Fantastic, Lainie. Now, you've also facilitated the coming together of people as well. That was my first step, my first connection, physical connection with the World Schooling community was when I attended the Project World School Family Summit in Chiang Mai. For me, that was one of the most valuable things I've done in our journey so far, and it's something that I really encourage, people to get along to something like that. Physical get-togethers. I mean, we've got this online space and it's wonderful, but physical get-togethers where you can actually touch and feel people and have these conversations about what's going on. So, you've got a summit coming up in Mexico soon, is that right? You can tell us a bit about there?
Sure. Well, the reason why we started the summits, this is the fourth year for the summits. About 6 years ago, actually we're starting our seventh year, doing teen retreats. We're facilitating teen retreats. And so we started to create these intentional temporary learning communities for teenagers. And there's so much value for the teens, bringing them to a new place and investigating and experiencing different cultures and really understanding who they are as teens and how they fit into the world. I didn't want to do this for adults initially. I really thought that the value of my purpose in my work was working with teens, because that's where I just lit up. I really felt like I was on path, but I had been asked over and over and over, when are you going to do something for families who don't yet have teens, or families that want to just get together? And I said, okay, I'm going to organize a quote unquote camping trip, and this was 4 years ago in Mexico, and it'll be about a week before the teen retreat that I'm doing. And let's all go meet here. Here's the campground. Here's the town. And here's the place where you can register. And I'll make all the reservations. And I've got ideas for all these sessions because remember, I've been facilitating sessions now for teens, and I understand about communication and icebreakers and team building and really digging into some of these issues. So I've had lots of experience, not only with the teens, but also from my professional life back in Los Angeles. Running businesses and creative companies requires a lot of that teamwork and brainstorming and solving problems together collectively and cooperation and collaboration. Those are things that I really excelled at. So, okay, I'll do it. I'll organize the first summit. We'll call it, a World Schooling Summit, and we'll do it on the beach here in Mexico. And the campground had space for 30 people. Suddenly, I had 150 people register, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So, luckily I had a partner, a beautiful world schooling family that I connected with that lived in that town who helped me secure a wonderful hall. And that became the site of our first summit. And the first summit was disorganized. It was very unconference-y, as in the unconference kind of style of gathering in the technology world. And we ran a beautiful kids camp, and everybody loved being together. And I just thought, wow, we really do need this connectedness. And we did all sorts of things, round tables and circles and sharing and reflection circles and fear circles and all the things that I do with the teens, we did in community with the parents, and the parents were so grateful, and the feedback that I got was absolutely tremendous, absolutely helpful. And they said, we'll keep coming to these, but here's what you should really do. You should get a little more organization. You should do, a little bit more around this. And I listened to every single word of that. So the next year we did it again in Mexico, and this time 200 more people showed up, and it was a massive gathering, and we learned what worked and what didn't work from that gathering. And we realized that having 350 people at those gatherings then took away the intimacy, and that our sweet spot was around 200 people, which is we limit our summits to now. But that was also an incredible learning. And then we did it again the next year in Mexico, and that was more suited to the size, and we finally we got our groove on that. And then the one that and then the community asked me, stop doing them in Mexico, bring them to Asia, bring them to Europe. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I think I get how to do this now, and I understand what people are after. The feedback has been incredible, both from constructive perspective and what people are coming and needing and really getting out of it. So we created one in Chiang Mai, which is where I met you, and that I think has been our jewel. That was the most sort of the flow, everything came together. The community was so tight. There was such a variety of different people from different walks of life and perspectives. There was such a held feeling of honor and respect for where everybody was. And it was really okay coming as yourself, being yourself there. And that to me was, okay, I get it now. Now I know exactly how to facilitate, hold space, and empower, and step back and step in where needed. So all of those things, it's taken 4 years, and I get it now. I get how to facilitate these. We do these gatherings not for profit. We do them in order to serve the community. And for me, if this was happening for me when I first started out, I imagine how many less mistakes I would have made, or evenings where I felt so isolated or alone. And also for my son, who really didn't realize that there was community for him as well. I think it's a little easier to make community, find community for children when you're about, I think the sweet spot is like, in terms of ease, about 12 and under, right? Once you get out of the tween and hit your teens, things change, right? They're measuring themselves against their peers, or if they don't have peers, they're valuing what they believe the peers should look like or be like, or their lives should look like or be like, with peers that are not real, right? And it just becomes a lot of sort of mental stuff. This is, for the last 6 years of working with teenagers, we've produced probably 20 international retreats from Mexico, Peru, Wales, Thailand, in Africa, in Europe. We've done them all over. But for us, it's equally important to reflect on the outer world experiences with reference to the inner worlds, right? How are our worldviews coloring how we're seeing, how we're experiencing this particular thing? Where are we closed down? Where are we open? Where are we triggered? And to get a group of teens together and empower them to express their emotional intelligence, because they've got it. Most of the time, they've never been asked to express it. They've got it, and they want to tell you what that is. And to be thoughtful, and to be mindful, and to be respectful, and to treat them as if they're valuable and their experiences are important. This is what lit me up. This sort of facilitation experience made all of my life experiences before make sense. It just trained me for everything that I was doing with the teens. So for me, world schooling with teens became my biggest teacher, right? Besides that, of course, being a parent to my beautiful son. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, sorry, you got a mouthful on that one. You got not only the summits, but you got where the summits came from, too.
No, that's beautiful. And Lainie, you have so many stories that I would like to dig out of you. But just in today's conversation, it's like, oh, I want to know more about that. I want to know more about that. But we're talking for 24 hours or more, I'm sure. So I'll have to wrap it up here now. I thank you so much for coming on and having a chat to us. How can we keep a track of what you're doing, Lainie? How can we keep involved with you?
Gosh, well, please join the World Schooling community. It's We Are World Schoolers, and that is on Facebook. You can also find us on Instagram, and we do have a website coming soon, weareworldschoolers.org. And with Project World School, the teen retreats, you can find all of our available retreats for this year at projectworldschool.com. And this year, actually, we're doing our first family retreat. So it's employing all of the elements and strategies behind world schooling for families. Again, people kept asking me, when are you going to do this for a family? And I kept resisting. But this year, we're finally doing our first family retreat. So that's happening. And you can find that on the Project World School site. And for the summits, please visit worldschoolfamilysummit.com, and you can get to those links from the Project World School main site as well. There's also, on the summit site, there are video captures of almost all of the sessions. I do my best to capture everything and share it with the world. Again, this is not for profit. It's for a way to support our community through all this incredible, valuable information that we all hold a teeny piece of the story. And for those that are willing to share their knowledge, we are so honored. So those are from the sessions from the previous summits. And if you can't make it to a summit, please watch the sessions. There's hundreds of hours of information there. Yeah, that's it. There's a lot of places you can find me.
Again, thank you so much, Lainie, for coming on today. You're a treasure trove of information and experience, and we appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you so much for having me.